Now back to more prosaic matters of the day, and I caught up earlier today with the Minister for Families, for Social Services and for Women's Safety, Anne Ruston. I wanted to talk to her about the vaccine rollout, among other things. Anne Ruston, thanks for joining us. You're the Minister for Families, and families obviously have a strong interest in the pandemic management and the vaccine rollout. We need to get 6 million older Australians vaccinated before winter. With 2 million vaccinated now, we're going to miss that by a long shot, aren't we?
Well, I mean, obviously the most important thing is that we roll this vaccine out in the safest possible way. And look, clearly there have been some concerns over previous weeks and months around, first of all, the supply and then about making sure that the safety, particularly of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So I think the most important thing that we do need to do is to make sure that when we are asking people to take vaccines, that we're sure of the safety. And so that's why we have been very cautious about the rollout. And I think that's the appropriate way to be doing it.
Do you think that we've been a victim of our own success with the hotel quarantine, the international borders virtually keeping this country coronavirus free? A lot of people aren't particularly exercised about getting the vaccine, especially, of course, the under 50s. Even elderly Australians I've spoken to said, well, they're keen to get their flu vaccine first, their flu shot for the season, then they'll worry about the coronavirus vaccine.
Well, I think it is very important that Australians understand that the vaccine rollout is tremendously important, not only because of the protection that provides them from a health perspective, but also making sure that we're able to open up our economy. And yes, we have been extremely successful, and I think every Australian should be enormously proud of the health and the economic and the social success of Australia in the face of what has been the most extraordinary world pandemic. But of course, we would still say to people, yes, Australia has been in a very lucky place with the very low numbers of people who have had coronavirus, but still, please don't make that a reason for you not to have the vaccine.
Given our success, and especially given that the vaccine rollout is going ahead, why are we being so unfair to Australians in India compared to other countries? In the US, in the UK, in Europe last year, there were infection rates then higher than now is occurring in India, yet we never stopped those people from coming home.
Well, at the moment, obviously, like we have taken in every other situation, we've taken a precautionary approach, and we need to find out more detail in relation to the strain of the COVID pandemic rolling out currently in India. And I have to say, Chris, it's absolutely tragic to see what we are seeing and hearing about what's happening in India, and our thoughts go out to the Indian population. And I know Australia stands ready alongside the rest of the world to make sure that we are helping them. I know that vaccines are arriving, oxygen's arriving, ventilators are arriving in India as we help support them through their absolute time of need and crisis. But we still have to make sure that we have got the appropriate things in place in Australia to be able to cope should we be bringing people back from anywhere around the world. And I think that Australians expect, whilst we should be compassionate to people who are Australians and we should try and get them home, we must do so in a way that is safe for them and also safe for the rest of the population. And that's what we'll continue to do.
I just want to get some information from you, Anne Ruston, on your new ministry. It is a new ministry, the Ministry for Women's Safety. Now, of course, we're all in favour of women's safety. We're in favour of the safety of everyone in our community. But given that law and order in particular is a state issue, what can the federal government do? What can a federal minister do to improve the safety of women in our community?
Well, I think the federal government has a very strong leadership role, and I'm very keen to talk to my state and territory counterparts about a number of things. Making sure that we've got uniformity of laws across jurisdictions, making sure that we're sharing information so that if a perpetrator is registered in one state as being perhaps having an intervention order or the like, that information is shared across states so that person can't leave that state and freely move around another state and potentially be a perpetrator on other women in other states. I think also the federal government's got a very strong role about education and prevention and early intervention, and making sure that we have the conversation with the Australian public, because you're absolutely right, Chris. Governments cannot pass laws to stop domestic violence. AVOs are a piece of paper and are only worth what the paper they're written on if they're enforced. But I think we also need to understand that every Australian has to play a role in stopping violence, because it starts with disrespectful behaviour, and we all need to have a think about how our behaviours impact on other people. So I think there is a strong role for the federal government, particularly around that leadership role and making sure that we work across all states and territories. So we're sharing information and putting in place the best possible programs by picking the best things from each state and territory.
Anne Ruston, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.